So today is going to be kind of an unscripted little video today. And before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and invite the new people to hit that subscribe button if they wish, and ring the bell if they wish to be notified of my newest videos. Well, today we're discussing transitioning to Linux from Windows as a person who has never used Linux perspective type of video. And many questions arise in switching to Linux from Windows. And one of the major questions is, can I still do the work that I do in Linux that I can do in Windows? And, well, that can be a complicated little question. It all depends on what kind of work you do. Now, but the general consensus is most home users can do what they do on the computer today in Linux. Let me just go over a few things here. As you can see, I've got a Manjaro Mate spin Linux version spun up here on this computer. You've seen this desktop several times. This is the computer I generally do my captioning on. This is actually going to change in a few days. I'm going to be swapping this computer out for another distro in a little while, because this is the computer I hop on. So, and then I'll be reviewing probably another distro. It'll probably be like an Ubuntu spin or something, because I want to start addressing things from a beginner's point of view in Ubuntu and Linux Mint. That's your beginner's distros. If you want to use this Manjaro, this Mate desktop, not Manjaro Mate, I would highly suggest that you use an Ubuntu spin called Ubuntu Mate. It's a little bit easier to maintain. Manjaro is a little bit more advanced to maintain. There's some things you need to know about Arch to be able to maintain it. But as you can see, it looks a lot like your Windows layout. You can get your standard, almost Windows-like layout with Linux. Now, there are other desktops for Linux, and some look like Windows too. There's also the Cinnamon desktop, which is what you'll find in Linux Mint. And it looks a lot like Windows 2. I may put a screenshot on this screen too, so of the Cinnamon desktops in case you're interested. But then you have, well, we're going to go ahead and reload that because I don't know what that's about. It's been doing that a couple times. I think that maybe the bleeding edge packages for the brisk menu are a little bit unstable, but that's Manjaro. That has nothing to do with Mate. Manjaro tends to run on the bleeding edge, so it's kind of like a testing environment. That's why I suggest new people don't use it. But we're going to go ahead and hit the menu again. And but one thing is that a lot of people do at home as a home user is documents. For that, you have several options. You have WPS Office, you have SoftMaker Office, but the most common is LibreOffice. And the reason why is it's compatible with almost anything. So we're going to go ahead and spin up LibreOffice Writer. It's your basic word processor. You can do practically anything you can do on your standard Windows Microsoft Office kind of suite. And it's a really powerful, you can do powerful little Office program. You can do like tables and do all kinds of formatting and stuff. It's basically Microsoft Office. I've been using the OpenOffice family. It's from the OpenOffice family for a long time. I have never actually bought Microsoft Office. This is what I've used. That, and I did use Microsoft Works when I was a kid. I'm actually going to be going over that in Linux in a video eventually, but that to be looked at in the future. But this is what I would recommend. You also have your spreadsheets. It'll take a second to come up. And you also have like your PowerPoints as well with Microsoft Impress. So there's hardly anything that you can't do in LibreOffice that they can do in OpenOffice. Also, it's backward compatible with OpenOffice and almost every Office program that I know known to man. I mean, if you wrote it in an Office program, this thing can read it. So, I mean, literally, if you wrote it into your old Microsoft Works format or WordPerfect back in the day, this thing can read it. It can also read all the Microsoft Office formats, rich text, basic text, etc. So literally, if you need to do basic Office work, all that stuff, the answer is yes, you can do it. We're not going to save that. As you can see, it looks like that. And there's a lot of stuff like, as far as can I use my Windows apps in Linux? Well, yes and no. Natively, out of the box, distros do not support Windows apps out of the box. And that's by design. But Linux is not Windows, excuse me. Linux is not Windows. It can have some of the basic functionality of Windows type things, but Linux is not Windows. But there is a way to do it, and it's called Wine, which stands for Wine is not an emulator, kind of. And literally, it creates certain Windows calls and all that stuff inside your Linux system so you can run Windows programs natively. I have SimCity in 2000 installed, and this is a Windows game, and it can run just fine in Linux. Of course, I don't have the CD in, but this is just a Windows program running in Linux. Now, Wine is not perfect, and it doesn't run everything. Some programs will call on Windows functions very, very heavily, and they don't work. Like, a prime example is Adobe Premiere, a video editor. That does not work in Linux through Wine at all, or very, very poorly. So, some programs you will not be able to run inside of Linux, but that's what they make virtual machines and dual booting for, to run those programs that you can't run. But 90% of the times I can get it running in Wine with configuration, etc. And there are ways to configure Wine easy, and then vanilla Wine is easier, like Play on Linux and Lutris. And CodeWeaver's even made something as well that makes Wine easier to configure. Or you can configure it the vanilla way through the command line, which is what I do. But at one time, when I learned Wine, that was your only option. It's not your only option now. Also, for gaming, you can game in Linux too. Your best option is through Steam, and it's got Steam Proton, which is a fork of the Wine I just talked about, and it can run Windows games as well through Proton. And there's some things that you can get Proton working, but literally Proton is amazing. I hardly ever have a problem with. The only thing that you'll have problems with is one, DRM schemes. Some DRM schemes will call on Windows calls, and they're not available in Windows. Windows Wine cannot simulate those. And anti-cheat systems, like in a prime example of this with an anti-cheat system is Fortnite, a very, very popular shooter. The anti-cheat system does not like Wine at all. And there are a few anti-cheat systems on here that don't work. Destiny 2 is one of the ones that we'll call Wine an emulator, and normally would try to ban you for using Proton. So be a little bit wary of that when using games with anti-cheats. You might actually get banned from servers if you use Proton with them. But for the most part, I can get a game running if you have the hardware to do it. But the simple it's not a simple answer of switching from Windows to Linux. If you can get your work done, it depends on the program. It depends on what you do. Often you can find a free and open source Linux alternative to what you want to do in the repositories for a Linux version. Sometimes there isn't. I mean, if you are a Premiere user, you have a video editor called Kden Live that is very, very similar. And you got DaVinci Resolve, but DaVinci Resolve does not work on all hardware. It has issues with AMD graphics cards. So that may not be an option if you use AMD, which a lot of Linux people use because of the open source drivers. But literally, yes, most times you can do exactly what you're doing with your computer now in a Windows-based environment, in a Linux-based environment, and there's a great benefit to it. One of the biggest benefits is you don't have Microsoft spying on you with their telemetry and their data collection, which I'm going to be covering in a privacy video in the future. But if you really knew what Windows collected, it would probably scare you on the amount of data they know about you. So, and my honest belief is what you do with your own computer is none of Microsoft's damn business. So that's one of the reasons why I don't use Windows. But also, when Linux just has so many options, where Windows has next to none. I can make my desktop look like anything in any desktop environment. And this is from someone who can use the big three as far as operating systems: Windows, Mac, and Linux. I can use all three. I can use any of them. I can sit down and use any of them. But right now, I've gotten to the point where I have to think about Windows. And I use Windows for most of my life. So these days, yeah, Linux is for me, and it may be for you. I hope that this has answered some questions. This has kind of been me rambling on a little bit in an unscripted form, but literally, hopefully this answered a few questions about Linux. And if you're considering running Linux, there's a couple things you can do. And the biggest thing I would suggest is not jump in and install it on a computer unless you have a spare computer hanging around, an older computer that you don't use for anything. Then you can install and run it on that. But for those who don't, and that's most people, what I would suggest is go out and get like a 8 or 16. I would highly suggest at least an 8 gigabyte flash drive, 8 or 16. 16 works too. And go to Ubuntu and download various spins and use a program called Balena Etcher or Rufus on your Windows. You can use either one. They both run in Windows. And flash the image to a flash drive, and you can boot from USB using F11. On most hardware, you press F11 when you see your initial boot screen, and it'll bring up a boot menu. And you just hit USB, and it'll boot, and you can run a Linux environment off of USB and play around with it. And that's what I would suggest you do. Do that. Go to Linux Mint. Download Linux Mint. That would be one of my go-to beginner distros as well. But I hope this answered some questions for you. Thank you for watching the Penguin Revolution. As always, please like this video if you really liked it. Share it with other people. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Have a great day.